Hey Tim, what's on the call sheet today?
Hey Tristan. Today we're going to look at the importance of testing and metering LED color response in cameras with a method I call the 4 Fs.
I'm glad we're on this topic of testing. We're starting to do a lot of shooting, and we're finding that we're getting some unpredictable results with the lighting. It all looks good to the eye, but when I'm editing, it just doesn't seem right.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, most cinematographers, when they think about the lighting, they focus on the shot's look, how it meters for exposure, and what treatment you're going to give it in post.
Yeah, I'm mostly concerned with the final image.
Yeah, and in the past, lights had full spectrum, so there was a lot more predictable output. Nowadays, that's not always the case. So we use the 4 Fs to clearly understand our workflow's color response. When you're testing lights, we need to look at things that are first familiar, so we have a baseline expectation. So when we're choosing familiar things, we must have a predetermined idea of what the subject should look like. We need an expectation and specific outcome in mind. That way we can compare expectations with the results of our testing. With that in mind, we need to look at familiar faces, skin tones, or people for whom we know the true look. One of our main jobs is exposing a wide range of skin tones. Third, fabrics and paint. We have to have paint swatches or articles of clothing that have already been a part of our experience. This includes color charts. These represent the costume and sets we will be shooting. And lastly, your mom's going to be proud of this one, fruits and vegetables. Again, we know what an apple or an orange should look like. And when we test our lights, we will have an expectation of the desired results.
So the idea is we look at all of these things, all of which are familiar, in order to test how the lights and camera sensors react. That way we have a baseline understanding of the sensor's reactions, and we can also accurately predict how novel or unfamiliar things will be photographed.
Exactly. The spectral characteristics of LEDs are very different than what we generally have dealt with in the past. In fact, many LEDs have unique spectral fingerprints.
Okay, what exactly is a spectral fingerprint?
Well, a spectral fingerprint is the unique levels of various light energy waves emitted by any source. A candle looks different than the sun, which looks different than an HMI, because they emit different levels of light waves. Each one has a different spectral fingerprint. We have more information on spectral fingerprints in the link below.
Why are LEDs problematic?
Well, let's look at tungsten, for example. For all intents and purposes, every tungsten light emits the same full spectrum. LEDs differ because many don't have a full spectrum. Furthermore, each particular LED fixture may have a unique spectral fingerprint, and they all differ from what they're trying to emulate. Daylight, tungsten, what have you.
Let's see.
Here's a spectral fingerprint of our Rainbow Lights RGBX diodes with spectrum control at 0%, mixed to the color of 5600 Kelvin daylight.
Wow, really spiky. It's not a full spectrum at all.
And here's the RGBX light set to 50% spectrum. And lastly, 100% spectrum.
That looks a lot better.
Let's compare them all. You can imagine how that might complicate your lighting. Between the red, blue, and green, there are different amounts of spectrum. So how this light reacts to any subject, or how they compare to each other, is anyone's guess. And it certainly will not react the same way as the fuller spectrum of natural daylight.
So you better test before you get on set.
And that's what I've done with the 4 Fs. I've taken numerous familiar faces, fabrics, fruits, and vegetables, and run light tests with various light sources. Daylight, HMI, tungsten, and RGBX at different spectrum control settings. We then filmed each trial and recorded their spectral fingerprints.
Let's see the results.
Let's start with daylight, HMI, RGBX at 100%, 50%, and 0% spectrum.
Crazy how different they all look.
Let's take a closer look so we can really examine the differences in our examples. This is the first shot here. This is the daylight shot.
Yep.
and this is actual daylight. And if you look at the BTS photo here, we actually have a garage door open, and this is sun bouncing off the world and piping into our setup. And you can see the spectrum as well. It's full spectrum, and this is our good reference, essentially, for our baseline. So what do you notice so far?
Skin tones look correct. All the colors, they're all very different, very vibrant. Looks fairly correct to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much what we saw on set.
Yeah.
The lays in the back, the orange and the yellow, were really, really vibrantly bright. It's hard, I think it's just because of the monitor, really, that you can't really see that. In my opinion, the camera is calibrated to this. It's calibrated to daylight spectrum, and all the objects are exactly what I expect.
Yeah, you can see the orange and yellow pop for sure.
Yeah, and they're still popping here. So let's go to HMI. When we go to HMI, I'm already seeing some differences.
Some more blue in the skin tones, maybe a little less red, I should say, maybe.
Yeah, they look greener to me.
Yeah.
Right, you can see that.
The colors in the back seem a little bit less vibrant.
And you can see with the spectrum that green is due to a spike of green that you can see in the HMI spectrum, right? And I kind of joke around that HMI has been giving everybody middle fingers for the entire time we've been using them. And that's why, it's right in the middle. Why don't you take a look at the reds?
Yeah, the reds are a little bit not as vibrant. They're a little bit, I would almost say dimmer, less saturated.
Yeah. It really, I think they're just dimmer. And if you look at the spectrum, you can see that the red spectrum, take a look at there, it dips when you get to the HMI, right? So now let's go to the spectrum control. So at 0%, everything looks relatively in the same ballpark, but there are differences that I see here.
Yeah, definitely.
What are the differences that you see?
The peppers kind of blend together a little bit, the red and the orange pepper.
Yeah, the orange really shifted its color a lot.
A lot. The two orange fabrics look exactly the same color now.
Yeah. Most importantly for me, I think it's the skin tones. Everyone looks a lot ruddier, like they had too much to drink.
Yeah.
I see a lot more red in
Magentas.
their magenta. Their faces are definitely a lot more magenta. Yeah. Now, if I go down to the good spectrum, it looks a lot more natural to me now.
You can obviously see that's on yellow pepper and orange pepper or red pepper.
Right. With every light having its own unique spectral fingerprint, even under ostensibly the same setting, you must know your lighting situation to avoid any unwelcome surprises.
Right. Knowing what to expect is the name of the game. If you know what the result will be, it's art. If you don't, it's a mess.
That's just one example. If we test for tungsten and match it with the RGBX at different spectrum levels, the results look like this. RGBX at 100%, 50%, and 0% spectrum.
Again, a wide variation in supposedly the same light.
Right. Now, we've improved some tools to get you to adjust your light's white output with a method called Just Noticeable Difference, or J&D. It's a form of colorimetric control where any alteration occurs in even color increments as opposed to evenly divided CCT values. For example, the noticeable difference between 6,000 degrees Kelvin and 7,000 degrees Kelvin is a lot less than, say, 2,000 degrees and 3,000 degrees Kelvin. So J&D gives you more intuitive colorimetric control where steps are more evenly distributed across the colors we expect to control.
We've talked a lot about white light, but what about colors?
Well, we introduced Hue Intensity Equalization. Hue Intensity Equalization balances the output of saturated colors to white light. So if you want to start figuring out saturated color exposures, first set the fixture's white light exposure, then dial in the color. As a result, you will never clip out your color exposure.
It feels like there's no solid ground here.
Well, there isn't. What we've been talking about is the different outputs of different lights. The next variable is how different sensors in different cameras, not unlike how different film stocks, react to that light.
What is the standard?
Well, there's actually a couple. You've heard of them, probably. It's SSI, CRI, TLCI, TM30. Each one of these metrics looks at light differently, So you have to know what you're measuring and how to apply each standard. For example, most lights are calibrated to TM30 white light spectrum standards, which matches most camera calibrations. That's a great baseline. After that, SSI ratings are great for matching light spectrums. TLCI ratings are geared specifically towards older broadcast cameras. So if you're using those cameras, you might be better off taking that rating into account. But none of these ratings are a definitive measurement.
With so many standards and ratings, different kinds of lights emitting varied color spectrums,
You have to test.
familiar faces, fabrics, and fruits.
Producers and technicians need to understand that these lights, while amazing in their capabilities, each have unique characteristics which need to be understood. So, it's really imperative that DPs and gaffers understand what lights can reliably do and how they will act. That is done by testing in pre-production and being familiar with lights, talent, wardrobe, sets, and post workflows.
So my takeaways are to really spend time testing your lights and cameras with the 4Fs, and to do it all in pre-production, while you have the time to make corrections and adjustments.
That's right. Thanks for watching, and remember, be safe.
We'll see you at Crafty.
Roll 3, scene 4, take 4.
Wait, it's take 1.